But this is Bixby 101, getting started. With that said, let's get started. So who am I? My name is Roger Kibbe. I'm a senior developer evangelist for Viv Labs. We're the division of Samsung that is really the brains behind Bixby. A couple quotes here that explain how I think about technology. So I think technology should empower and enable, but I also think it should get out of the way. And that's one of the reasons I'm so excited about voice technology. I think it's an empowering and enabling technology, but instead of having to run and find a device, you just speak, and so it definitely gets out of the way. I'm a dad of 2 teen daughters. I grew up in the Bay Area and still live in the Bay Area, and a UC Berkeley graduate, so I have to say, go Bears. All right, good to hear some other Bears in here. All right, let me see if my... All right, so how to get started developing for Bixby. Let's jump right in. So first thing, www.bixbydevelopers.com. This is your homepage for everything Bixby. This is where you will download the Bixby Developer Studio, the IDE that I'll talk about in a second. This is where all of our documentation is. This is where links to sample code, links to videos. This is your first place to get started and where you will go back and back again as you're learning and getting even more advanced with your Bixby development. My clicker isn't working, so we'll go manual. Okay, so the Bixby Developer Studio I mentioned, www.bixbydeveloper Studio is where you www.bixbydevelopers.com is where you download the Bixby Developer Studio. This is an all-in-one IDE. This is where you do all your development. This is where a simulator. Today I'm going to show you the simulator for a phone, but if you were just at the keynote, you saw that we just opened this up so you can develop for watches, smart appliances, and super exciting for me is TVs, because I think there's amazing voice applications that could be built for TVs. This is where you do your debugging and your testing. So all Bixby development is done in this single IDE. Okay, so to show you how to do Bixby development, I'm going to use this simple movie search capsule. And when I say capsule, what I mean is a voice application, okay? I know Alexa calls them skills, Google calls them actions, we call them capsules. So let's jump right in, and I want to show you a demo of that capsule in action and what it does, and then we'll jump into the code and how I developed it. So this is the simulator. Like I said, I'm going to show you today simulating with a phone. But if you're at the keynote, you saw the other ways that you could simulate. So first thing I'm going to do is, so show me the movies. So this is a really simple database. I look at the top 20 most popular movies of the last 5 years and compiled them all together. So there's 100 movies in here that are the most popular over the last 5 years, all right? So if we scroll down here, there's a bunch here, all right? Let's try an actual search here. So here we go, getting a little more interesting. So now I said, find adventure movies released last year. So these are all the adventure movies that were released last year. Okay, that sounds cool, but you know what? I don't really feel like adventure. I'm thinking about, how about some crime movies? Okay, there's only a couple that were really popular released last year. All right? Now let's switch over and talk about this year adventure movies. Okay. And you know what? That shows you how our NLU is pretty smart because my little keyboard macro did something weird there. Okay. So here we go. We have adventure movies that were released this year, and there's a list there. Let's drill down and take a look at one. We'll just take a look at Spider-Man Far From Home, first one. And so now I've drilled down to that movie, and I see there's a movie poster, the movie title, the release year, a summary, and the genres for that movie. So this is the capsule that I built for this talk, and I'm going to go through each of the components that made up this capsule and teach you how to build something like this. And this is really an introductory talk. I want to several points. I'll be talking about some future talks this afternoon at 3:30. There's a much more in-depth talk about using Bixby Developer Studio and really understanding everything you can do with that. So if you have some time, please go to that. It'll really enhance your knowledge. Okay, so first thing to know about Bixby development is it's pretty darn different than development that you've probably done. So most development, web, mobile, and other voice assistants is traditional and it's imperative. What I mean by that, it's very code-driven. So you write a bunch of code to make it happen, and really in your code, what you're doing is saying, how do I do this? So your code describes how to do it. With Bixby, it's quite different. So it's model-driven, it's declarative. So you're going to spend a lot of time modeling things and much less time doing traditional code development. And you can think of it as describing what to do, not how to do. In order to really understand this, you need to jump in and start using the Bixby Developer Studio. But you'll see some of that today, how a lot of what I'm going to show you was models, not traditional code. Okay, so here are all the components of a basic Bixby capsule. And I'm going to actually go through each of these and show you how I built those for that simple movie search capsule, and importantly, how they all connect together and fit together to make a fully running capsule. So let's get started. Okay, so you saw me say, find an adventure movie released this year. So that was the utterance that I typed in. By the way, I'm typing for this demo instead of speaking, but I can always speak to the simulator, and obviously with Bixby on a device, you can both type or speak. So the important thing is this utterance, and I need to match, what am I trying to do when I hear this utterance? Well, in Bixby, you call that an action, and our action is called find movie. You could think of that as the verb. Some other platforms call it the intent. And then I need to find there's a couple values in there that I need to extract out of that utterance. So one, adventure, that was a genre. And then this year, and if you think that is a date time, what we call a date time expression, but really it's a date range. So this year is a date range. And you can think of those concepts as what we call them in Bixby, but you can also think of those as a noun, and some other platforms call those a slot. So let's jump over to Bixby Studio, and let's see how we modeled those concepts and actions. Okay, so this is the simulator. This is the studio. Okay, so these concepts. Okay, let me make this a little bigger for you guys. How's that? A little easier to read? All right, good. So this is the genres. So this is an enumeration, right? There's a limited set of genres that these movies can be, and so it limits that to this enumeration of possible values for a genre. If I go down, there's an ID for a movie, there's the name of the movie, poster path, that was the image path, this summary of the movie. You can see each of these, so let's look at summary. That just says text, it's a summary and a description there. So these are modeling those simple concepts that I use both to extract value out of it, but I also use to display. As you saw, genre was something I used. I'm going to use that for display, and when in my search query, I used a genre. What you don't see in here is what captured that last year, that time frame. Let me show you why. So let me show you the action itself and how that's modeled. Okay, so this is our action. It's called find movie. It is type search, so I'm searching for something. Description, and then we go down here and it says collect. And what collect is saying, hey, here's all the inputs that I can grab here. All right, so let's look at this first one. I didn't show you that, but it can collect the name of a movie, so I could search for the name of a movie. Now look at this line here that I've highlighted. Min optional max 1. So that's defining the cardinality of this input. So that means 0 to 1. But it could say min required, it could say max many. I'll show you something that's max many in a second. All right, so I can collect a name, I can collect a genre, and I can collect what I call a release date time expression. Now notice this type down here is time.datetime expression. What I'm using there is a library capsule. I'm going to talk about those a little bit more later, but it's built-in functionality that we use to make it easier for you to develop a capsule. So in this case, date time expression understands all kinds of cool stuff like this year, last month, Christmas 2020, Thanksgiving week 2019. So all those natural language ways of saying things that are essentially, if you think about it as a developer, are a date range. So it takes that natural language and converts it into a date range for you. Okay? And that has cardinality, min, optional, max 1. And then I'm going to output a movie. I'm going to get back to that. But this is the movie concept I'm outputting. Okay. So you saw me use a couple utterances that were different. But even that utterance, find an adventure movie released this year, if you think about it, you can say it in many different ways. I could say, find a 2019 adventure movie, show me an adventure movie released this year. I'm sure if you thought about it in your imagination, you could think many, many different ways of saying that same thing. So with Bixby, what we have to do is train it and say, hey, here's all the utterances you need to understand. We call that training. So with training, you enter that utterance, and then you define a couple things. One is what we call the goal. So when I see this utterance, what do? Now, my example, I've mapped it to the goal of find movie, that action. Get a little more advanced. It actually is a better practice to map things to concepts, but we're keeping things super simple today because it's Bixby 101. And then I got to extract some values out of that. So look at all those things highlighted in yellow. I got to extract a genre out of that, and I got to extract a date time expression. And I got to put those in those concepts. Okay. Oops. Okay, so let's jump into the Bixby Studio and take a look at what training looks like. So we're in our simulator. Sit down here under Resources and ENUS, because training is in English language. Okay, so look at this. We have this goal, find movie for this utterance, find a science fiction movie released this year. If I hover over science fiction, what it's saying is, hey, I'm going to extract a genre, that value out of that, and I'm going to stick it in, I'm going to extract science fiction as a value and stick it in the genre concept, okay? And this year, I'm extracting the value and I'm sticking it in the date time expression. All right, so if I expand this training, I can see what Bixby is doing, okay? So I'm grabbing those two values out of this utterance, and then my goal down below is find movie, and the output of find movie is the movie concept, all right? Let me close this guy up, and let's take another one. The second one is for name. Okay, here's another one I showed you an example of. Okay, 2019 is a date time expression. Science fiction, scrolling off the back, is a genre. If I expand this guy, then you can see it's exactly the same. Different utterance, but Bixby understood behind the scenes that, hey, out of this utterance, I want to do the same thing. I want to grab the genre out of that utterance. I want to grab the date time expression out of the utterance. I'm going to go to this find movie action, and the output is movies. So with training, what you do is you need to think about all the things you want your capsule to understand. And then you start entering training. And I will say there's both an art and a science to training. It is very easy to overtrain. People think, there's 20 things I want it to understand, I'm going to enter 20 utterances. Well, I'll tell you, the natural language engine is a lot smarter than that. So best practice would be here's the 20 things I want it to say, and then start thinking to generalize some utterances that you think might map and test them out. You want just enough training. If you overtrain, you can actually confuse the natural language understanding engine. So, like I said, it's definitely an art and a science, and something that frankly takes a while to get used to. And I would say it's one of the things that beginning developers with Bixby struggle the most is getting training right. So give yourself time to think about how training is going to work, try it out, and test it. All right. Okay. Art and the science. You want to get really a deep dive. This afternoon at 4:30, natural language training, best practices for Bixby. I've seen the practices for that session many times. I'm going to go to it because there are things I can learn from that session. So I really, really highly recommend that session, and that's in the same room. Okay, so I showed you, we have our training, and our training mapped to an action, and then I grabbed some concepts out of that, genre and a date time expression. Okay, now what the heck do I do next? Well, I need to run my business logic. In order to run my business logic with Bixby, there's two things I need to do. One is what we call an endpoint. And all an endpoint is says, hey, here's your action. Here's your business logic. I'm the glue between the two. And then we have our code, in this case running locally in the Bixby capsule. It's findmovie.js, some JavaScript that will do search for those movies, and then it's going to create output. Okay, so let's switch over to the Bixby Studio, and let's look at the endpoints and the code for this guy. Okay, let's close this guy up. Base, endpoints. Okay, look at this endpoint. I said it was really simple. It's saying I'm modeling and saying, hey, my action endpoint is find movie. Here's the three usual suspects, name, genre, and that release date time expression that I can accept as inputs. And in this case, I'm mapping it to findmovie.js, a local endpoint. So let's go take a look at that findmovie.js code. But before I do that, let me just show you the underlying data here. Really simple. I said it wasn't complicated. It's literally just a bunch of JSON of these 100 movies, and has the ID, name, summary, release date, genres, one to many, and then a path to that. So I'm searching through this JSON. When I use one of those utterances, I'm searching for genres or names, etc. All right, so let's go look at our findmovie.js action. All right, so look at this function. Get what the inputs are, name, genre, release date, time. Okay, and then as you see, there's just some really simple JavaScript filters. If I defined a name, filter on the name. If I defined a genre, filter on the genre. Release date time expression, a little more code involved there. So I extracted that out and put it in a little utility class. There's a bunch of code here, but I'm not going to go over it because I'm going to tell you it's all boilerplate code. Like I said, date time expression represents a time range. It can also represent an individual date. So you'd have this boilerplate code to understand what was the natural language input that the user used and extract the date time range or the individual date out of that, and that's all that code does. But it ends up just using this find by date, and this is just a JavaScript filter saying, hey, look at the release date. Is it within the range of that date time expression, begin date and end date? If it is, it's good for my search. Okay, so then you saw the output. So the UI for Bixby, and you saw an output. There was an image, there was a name, there was a release year, a summary, and genres, one or more. And all of those were stuck in this structure, this movie thing that I keep on talking about, and I haven't shown you yet. So let's look at the movie, and what we call that is a structured concept. And just think of this as an object to hold those simple primitive concepts on the left. All right. Okay. Don't worry about that session timed out right now. All right. So back, let me just clean some things up and close some things. Okay, models, structures, movie model. Okay, really simple. It is a structure named movie, and it has these properties. So there's an ID of type ID. There's an ID down here. Name of type name. There is a name down here, etc. Release date, summary, genres, poster path. So really, it's just an object containing all of those primitive concepts there. Okay, so when you saw the UI, you saw there's really two parts of the UI. One is the dialogue. That's the top part, and that's just that header text. It's also what Bixby speaks. I didn't turn on the speaker today because it's not super sexy in this demo, but in some other capsules, obviously, that can be really important. And then the view, the UI below that. Let's dive a little deeper in there and see what's in there. Okay, so the dialogue, I said it wasn't real sexy in this demo because it just says here are some movies. But it could be a lot more interesting. One thing really important about when you're defining dialogue you're also defining the speech output of Bixby. Now, by default, if the user is on the smartphone and they're looking at the smartphone, they obviously can see that UI. But we have this concept of what we call hands-free, and that means I used Hi Bixby to enable Bixby. And that means, you know what, if my phone could be over there, and I could say Hi Bixby, and it could turn on my phone, and I don't know if I can see the screen or not. So in that case, I want my speech output to be much richer, because I don't know if the user can see that UI or not. So you would have a much richer speech output there, and there's a lot of functionality we go into around that. I'm not showing that in the demo today, but just as a design consideration to think about, is the user able to see the screen? Are they not able to see the screen? And how to think about your dialogue and what's spoken in a different way. Okay, the view, and really you saw two views. So one was that list view, so that was a list of all those movies. And then the other one was a detailed view. So I clicked in one, or they could have spoken the name of it, and went through, and you saw the poster and the description and the release date and the genres, et cetera. So both of those were created using that movie structured concept. In the first case, it's an array of movies, and in the second case, it's an individual movie. Okay, so let's jump into the Bixby Studio and look at the dialogue and views. Okay. All right, so let's close this stuff up. All right, so movie dialogue. Okay, like I said, really simple here. This one thing I want to point out is this, match movie, okay? This is where we're saying, hey, this is a match pattern. It says, when you try to show the movie, use this dialogue, okay? Really important concept in Bixby is these match patterns that are used in dialogues and views that basically are saying, I'm trying to show this concept. What do I use to show it? What's the dialogue? And you'll see it on the UI as well. All right, this is really simple. Template, that's what was at the top, the header. In this case, I added a speech key. I didn't need to do that because by default, the template, what's spoken are the same. But I just wanted to show you that's where you change speech for Bixby if you needed to or if your design called for it. All right. Now let's look at the view. Okay. So this is a result view, and a match pattern is the movie. I have after it this lowercase movie, and that's just an alias that I'm going to use down below in my markup. And now I'm going to go render. Now, there's an if of the size of the movie equals 1. In other words, I'm in a detail view because there's only one movie to show. In that case, I'm going to actually use this layout macro. So we have this idea of macros where you can reuse code. I didn't have to do this here because I'm not reusing this. But for the sake of this demo and not have the code scroll off the screen, I actually put it in a macro. So I'm going to get back to you and show that macro in a second. But let's see if it's more than one. Okay. Well, now I have a list of movies, okay? And has details means they're clickable. And look at this, where each. So what I'm saying there is there's an iterator. So I'm going to iterate over that array of movies. And I'm going to use item as each individual result. And then I'm going to use cell card, okay? So a really simple example of Bixby views. Cell card is one of the components we support, all right? And in this case, I have the image of the movie. So you see a little image there, and then the name of the movie and a cell card repeating. You can do a lot more complicated things with Bixby views. This is a real simple example of showing a list view. And this is a pretty common pattern, is you have a capsule where you're searching for something, and then there's more than one result, and say you show a list of results. And so you see this kind of markup quite often in Bixby capsules. All right, so now let's look at that macro. So I have param movie, expression movie. What I'm doing is I'm passing the movie object to the macro. So let's look at the movie macro, layout macros, movie details layout. Okay. Parameters, it's expecting a movie. Type movie, it's required. Can't run without it. Okay. And now I have some more Bixby views code. Really simple here again. I'm just saying, hey, display an image, a few attributes of image, then display the name, the release year, summary. So that's what drew that detailed view that had the big image there, and then the name of the movie, the release year, the summary, and then the genres. If you look down at genres, guess what? There's more. There can be more than one. So our friend for each is back. The iterator is back. So I can iterate through as many genres as are applicable for this movie. So this afternoon, 5:30, a much, much deeper dive into Bixby views and all the things that you can do with them. So if you're a UI designer or any developer actually building for Bixby, I highly recommend this session. All right. All right, guess what? We have built all the parts of a Bixby capsule. So I showed you that training. I showed you those. I used 3 example phrases, and then I went in the studio and showed you several different phrases. And from the training, we extracted a couple values that were concepts. So in this case, genre and date time. And we mapped those utterances to find movie action. And then I created my endpoint and said, hey, find movie action connects to findmovie.js. Go past those values. And in findmovie.js, I had those filters that filtered. I output movies, or an array of movies. And then there was a dialogue, really simple. Here are some movies. And then I had a view that was rendered 2 different ways. One was that list view of all the arrays of movies, and then you could click on one or select one via voice and go to a detailed view. So to build a Bixby capsule, these are all the components you need to build. There are additional components with Bixby, but just about every capsule you will build will include all of these components. So it's really important when you're learning and getting up to speed and developing for Bixby is, 1, understand what each of these capsules do, but also understand how they all fit together. I would say a major challenge, I certainly had this when I was developing for Bixby. I was like, oh, wow, how do these things all fit together? So, find a simple example and think about how they all fit together and how training and concept and an endpoint matches it to the business logic, and then you use that match pattern. There's a little bit of learning curve there to understand how all the components fit together. Oops. Oh. Sorry, guys. We're going a little, my PowerPoint is, all right. Itchy trigger finger. Okay. So if you were at the keynote today, okay, sorry, screen was jumping around. If you're at the keynote today, you saw we introduced Bixby templates. We were super excited about these. So these are, for a developer, really just a wizard. You can go, you can create a fax thing, you can take jokes, you can create a quiz. You saw Adam Shire, our co-founder on stage, do what I think is super cool. He took a couple CSV files and imported them, and the template created all the code to do, basically to get that data out of it and display it, and then he wrote some natural language to go do some things, to go find things. These are really, think of these as great starting points for your development. Start with the template, it writes a bunch of code for you, and then you can move forward and build something amazing. If you want to understand more, tomorrow afternoon, 3:30 p.m., the Bixby building block session is going to talk not only about templates, but going to go into other building blocks like those library capsules and all these things that are valuable when you're building for Bixby. Okay, so I mentioned www.bixbydevelopers.com is your homepage for everything Bixby. But I should have said, you know what, we got a second homepage. That's our GitHub homepage, github.com/BixbyDevelopers. This is where all of our, we have about 30, maybe a little more than 30 repos there. And there's a bunch of example code. Everything from fully blown capsules there to kind of starter capsules that you can use for the basis of your development. It's a great resource to learn Bixby. That's where I learned Bixby, by going here and breaking most of the code here and things how I like to learn. And I continue to learn by looking at our GitHub repo. There are a bunch of samples on a bunch of repos on there, but I want to highlight one that is absolutely my favorite, called the Capsule Samples Collection. And what this is, it's designed for, hey, you know what, I'm reading the documentation, I'm like, okay, I think I got it, but I really, really want to see some sample code running that shows that concept in action. What we've done is we've written a bunch of really simple capsules that are really designed to show you one thing. So I believe there's about 14 or 15 in there that show you one thing, simple capsules, and help you educate and get educated and learn more about Bixby. There's a bunch of things that can do in there. I'm going to highlight a few that I think are really useful. One is the audio player. So if you want to stream long-form audio, there's an example of that. Bixby views, so we saw some of those. What this is a bunch of the different components you can use in a Bixby view. HTTP API calls, okay? I'll bet you, I don't know what percentage, but most voice applications use some API. We have examples of how to call an API, not just gets, but posts, et cetera. And then finally, input forms. So you didn't see that today in my demo, but when you're writing a Bixby UI and taking input, you have the option. You can always have the user input via voice, which is what you saw, or I actually typed it in the simulator, but it's the same thing. You can also create a rich input form. So with Bixby, you can not only use voice for input, but you can use an input form much akin to like what you might see in the web, and the user has the option to either speak it or type in that input. Okay, so you've gone and made this amazing capsule. Now you want to share it with the world. Well, how the heck does that work? So you share it with the world via our marketplace. So this is the Bixby marketplace. I have some screenshots here from my phone. Going from the left there, you see that's the home screen of the marketplace. There's some featured capsules and some promotional information there. Then you can drill down into categories, and then you can select a category. In this case, I selected music and audio category. And in this case, I selected the Audio Burst capsule. That's a partner of ours. They're here today or tomorrow, demoing a really cool capsule. And here is where an end user would go. And you can see that I've already enabled it. You see that button that says remove, so that would be disable it. But if that I hadn't, it would say add, and I would enable it. You can say, and these are example utterances to get started using the Audio Burst capsule. And then below that is some information about the capsule, description, and more metadata about that capsule. I think this is all the things that an end user will see about your capsule. So I said, it's metadata. So let's jump in over to Bixby Studio and take a look at that metadata that drives the marketplace. Okay. And actually, before I show you the metadata, let me get an important point. I think there's a developer kind of tendency, and I've fallen prey to this myself. You spend a lot of time coding, and you build this like amazing, super cool thing. And you're like, okay, I got to get it out in the marketplace, and I just throw something up and spend 5 minutes doing that. The problem is the marketplace is where you're marketing to end users. So you could have an amazing, amazing capsule, but you didn't spend time thinking about how you describe the capsule, what store categories you stuck it in, et cetera, what your icon looks like. People aren't going to enable it no matter how amazing it is. So my point is, spend some time and energy on that metadata that drives the marketplace so users will get excited and enable your capsule and see the cool thing you built. All right, a couple files of metadata. So first one, capsule.bxb, primarily technology. There's a lot of things in here. I'm not going to go over all of them. One thing that's interesting here is I have this target Bixby mobile. So that means a phone or a tablet. But as you saw today at the keynote, now you can add a TV as a target. You can add a watch as a target. You can add an appliance as a target. All right? These capsule imports are those library capsules that I talked about. So notice I imported viv time. That's how I got that date time expression. But I want to spend more time on capsule info. Okay, capsule info. This is the most important file that drives the metadata for the marketplace. So you have a name of your capsule, developer name, a dispatch name. I want to get back to that. Super important. I want to show you another example to show you how that works. Some search keywords, an icon, and a description. Okay, you know I said people will rush and do this? This is my rush job. I would never release this to the marketplace because nobody would ever get excited about this. I'd spend a lot more time thinking about what I was going to do here. But this gives you an example of the required fields. All right, dispatch name. I want to show you this hints file. Okay, so when you looked at the marketplace and you saw it said you can try, and then there was several phrases there. And what those are is driven by this hints, okay? So this is using a pattern. So in this case, it's ask dispatch name to do something. So ask simple movie search to show me movies, okay? So ask, there's several options there. Ask, with, begin. I can't remember all of them, but definitely check them out. Talk to. They give you a lot of flexibility, and depending on what your capsule is, you may want to use a different kind of dispatch pattern. Then you're using the dispatch name. So simple movie search was my dispatch name. And then I'm just using an utterance to show me movies. So I need to make sure that I train that utterance, show me movies, so it'll work. All right? You can have more. I have 3 here. You can have several. By default, the marketplace shows the first 3, and you need to expand it to see more. Okay. Tomorrow afternoon, 2:30, much deeper dive. Actually going to go into showing you how to prep a capsule for the marketplace and actually go through the submission process. Another really good session that I highly recommend. Okay, so that's all the basics of Bixby, but I wanted to go beyond the basics and show you a little more sophisticated, advanced things you can do with Bixby. Okay, first, personalization. So Bixby has some really powerful personalization capabilities. I'm going to explain this with this really simple example. So I could find this commuter capsule to find a train. Say, show me the next train from station A to station B. Okay, pretty useful. In the morning, I'm on my way to work. Show me the next train from my home station to my workstation. All right? And in the evening, it would be the reverse. So tonight, I'd want to say, show me the next train from my workstation to my home station. Okay, that alone is pretty useful. But if I turned on personalization for that utterance, then I could start saying, when's the next train to Bixby? And Bixby would go, hey, you know what? I'm contextually aware he's asking for this. It's a Tuesday morning. I'm going to use the smart default from his home station to his workstation and show him that train schedule. But if, conversely, at the end of the day, I said, when is the next train, or when is the next train? Bixby will be, it's the end of the day. I'm going to be contextually aware that he probably wants from work to home. So really simple example of personalization in action here. I think the powerful thing here is the more you use this capsule, the better it gets, the better it understands you. And you start being able to ask it and interact it in a more natural human way. Humans, we wouldn't say, when is the next train from station A to station B? You know, we'd say, when's the next train? And we'd understand contextually what you wanted to do. Okay, rich conversational capabilities. So I have an example here. So, hi Bixby, what should I cook for dinner tonight? So Bixby shows you some dinner recipes. And I say, show me some Italian ones. Now I see Italian dinner recipes. But then I go, show me Mexican ones instead. And Bixby is smart enough to go, hey, I still want dinner recipes, but I don't want to show you Italian recipes. I want you to show me Mexican ones. So it shows me Mexican dinner recipes. I add another modifier with sausage and onions. You're getting pretty specific here. Some Mexican dinner recipes with sausage and onions. And then I throw it for a loop by saying gluten-free. Unfortunately, I don't have any gluten-free Mexican dinner recipes with sausage and onions. So a lot of typical applications, what you do is you'd show, sorry, error, can't find that, out of luck. With Bixby, you can model what's called a relaxation. And that means drop one of the inputs And in this case, I dropped gluten-free, but I could have dropped Mexican or sausage or onions or any of those. And then show me some results and explain what happened. So it's like, hey, I'm sorry I could not show you any dinner recipes that are gluten-free, but here's some Mexican dinner recipes of sausage and onions. That's a lot more friendly than an error message or I couldn't find anything for you. So that's a relaxation. When I change Italian to Mexican, that's called a continuation. Here's the super cool thing about this. This is all model-driven. You don't need to write any code to make this work. You model it in your natural language, and then Bixby will just re-execute your search code automatically for you, adding the different parameters based upon that conversational interaction. I think I mentioned this before, but the natural language training best practices for Bixby today at 4:30. I'm going to be there because I want to learn. So great session. Okay, so you saw this morning. We're super excited about this. Okay, natural language categories. The way I describe this is you saw I used a dispatch name. So I said ask simple movie search to find movies, to find an action movie released in 2019. If there was a category for a movie search, there isn't yet, I could have just said, Bixby, find action movies released in 2019. No dispatch name needed. So I could talk directly to Bixby without a dispatch name. And this really solves a lot of challenges with voice. One of the big complaints voice developers have, and this is across all the platforms, is discoverability, right? You know, you have your dispatch name or what is it, invocation name, I believe, in Alexa. People forget it, and then they never use your capsule or your action again. But with this, with these natural language categories, if your capsule has enough capabilities to match all the required utterances for this category, then you can actually become the default. So you can override what's built into Bixby and be the default provider for that utterance and answer that utterance. You saw in the keynote the example of Lyft and Uber where you could switch between them. So in that case, there were two of them. And then it was the equivalent of if we all have a Samsung phone, you know if you download two map apps, and it says, well, which one do you want to use and what's the default? We brought that to voice via natural language categories. You can choose what you want your default provider to be. So we think this is a huge breakthrough in discoverability. Here are a list of all the categories. I'm not going to go through all of these, but just to give you, kind of whet your appetite and get you thinking about what you can do with these categories. We have a bunch more that we're working on. This is a big effort to think about all the utterances and how this is all going to work. But like I said, we think this is a game changer for the voice industry. Okay, I mentioned library capsules. I used the date-time library capsule, all right? And that was let me do that last year, this year, last month. It understood all those date ranges. There's a bunch more. These, like I said, are pre-built code modules. We've done all the work for you. So you want to add, you want to do long play audio player. Date time, I showed you an example. Geography and location, we can understand things. And Bixby can understand things like you could say the Golden Gate Bridge or the Empire State Building, and it would decipher and say that's actually the lat long of that or the address. There's even autofill for addresses as you're entering if you're typing on screen. So a lot of powerful capabilities there. With users' permission, a permission screen, where you allow this capsule to access this, you can access the user's contact or profile information and do some interesting things there. There's a bunch more library capsules. That Bixby building blocks presentation tomorrow afternoon, we'll go through those in more depth. Okay, payments and transactions. Here's an example of actually buying a concert ticket with Bixby. Clearly something where you want transactional support. If you have a Samsung phone, you may be very familiar with Samsung Pay. So, right, contactless payment, boom, you can use it, really cool. Guess what? You can build a Bixby capsule, integrate that Samsung Pay that the user has already enabled on their phone, which makes it really seamless for a user to buy. And we also support OAuth. What the heck? Well, developers, you may know what that is. A lot of people are head scratching, what the heck is that? The way I describe it is, look, we've all been to an e-commerce site. You log in, name, password, and you have your stored payment information and your stored addresses. OAuth is just a way to enable you to log in via that Bixby capsule. Devices. So you saw, what was the 160 million devices are Bixby enabled. Many, many more are coming. You saw how you can do development now for not just phones and tablets, which we've had for a while, but you can do development for watches, appliances, TVs. Fact that wasn't mentioned this morning is we are the world's biggest TV manufacturer. I think I'm personally super excited about voice on TV. Maybe you guys can tell it because I keep on mentioning it. But I think there's a lot of really, really cool interactive things that you could do with the TV, even while you're watching something. Imagine you're watching sports and you're like, okay, what is offsides, right? I'm watching a football game. And it showed you like a diagram of the play. I think there's cool stuff. Go build some amazing stuff for the TV or any of these other devices. We'll have a demo of those other devices in action tomorrow afternoon at 1:30 in room 210D, which is straight down the hallway on the right. Okay, this was also at the keynote, but here's a great, okay, if I didn't convince you to go develop for Bixby with this presentation, maybe this will help be the cream on top of the pie to go convince you to develop. We have a contest going on right now. So there's a 10K first prize, 2 5K second prizes. I think there's 25 1K prizes for the different store sections or categories, best in the category. And here's the cool thing. The first 250 capsules that are submitted automatically get a $300 Samsung store credit. So now is a really cool time to go build a Bixby capsule. You can get some Samsung store credit. You're one of the first 250. And if you build something amazing, you can win some even more, some cash prizes. Deadline for this is December 9th. That is to be approved. So there is an approval process. So I would say you need to submit your capsule for approval at least a week ahead of time. So don't wait or diddle-dally. Get building right now. BixbyDevJam.com is where you can go to get more details and sign up for this. Here's the sessions, getting started. There's an industry panel in 210D straight down about a bunch of people. Companies have already built for Bixby, and they're going to share their experiences. We have a thing about debugging and testing capsules, natural language training, ending the day talking about Bixby views. Then tomorrow morning, we'll start with conversational experience and hands-free. I mentioned that briefly. New Bixby devices, you can see a demo there. Talk more about the marketplace, and then that Bixby building blocks presentation. Okay, so with that, I will say go build something great. Absolutely knock our socks off with some capsule that we'd never seen or even thought of and things. I think it's such a great, great opportunity in the voice industry right now to innovate. www.bixbydevelopers.com, your homepage and where you get started. That's our GitHub address. Go get working right now. Sign up to Bixby Dev Jam. Get a chance to win some prizes. Once again, my name's Roger Kibbe. Let's continue this conversation. I'm pretty active on Twitter. So @RogerKibbe, let's follow each other and continue talking.